Hi everyone, I'm Lauren Espedia here at Tykes&Teens with my friend and colleague, Dr. Aneshka Marshall. She is the director of our prevention services, and we are so lucky to have her here with us today as our expert to discuss helping your child transition to middle school. So we're getting started a little late today. We had a little bit of a technology glitch, which happens often. And if anyone is joining us, I know it takes a minute for people to hop on. If you could just give us a thumbs up or a comment, let us know that you're here and that you can see and hear us. That would be helpful. That way we know that everything is working. So while we're waiting for you guys to do that, I will let Dr. Marshall go ahead and introduce herself, tell us a little bit about her credentials, her experience here at Tykes&Teens.
Sure. So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I received my doctorate from the Florida Institute of Technology in 2006. Ever since then, I've actually been at Tykes&Teens. I did my postdoc work here. I worked in the capacity of a therapist, where I mostly saw middle school and high school age youth because they were pretty much my favorite to work with. I received a certification in working with addictions from the Florida Certification Board in 2009. I also have a small private practice where I see individuals, and about 4 years ago I became the Director of Prevention Services here, where the goal is to develop events, programs that are geared towards middle school and high school age youth to deter them from any negative behaviors or harmful behaviors.
And if you are local here in Martin County, Florida, where we're located, and you have a child that has gone through middle school here, then they have most likely participated in an alcohol prevention program that is run by Dr. Marshall. She also, as she mentioned, puts on a lot of community events, and I think we've done over 300 of those free community events since our prevention department got started here. So you may recognize her from some of those events. Still just want to make sure that you guys can see us and hear us. Brian. Hi, Brian. Thanks for joining us. Good to see you here. So let's start at the beginning, Dr. Marshall. Let's talk about the buildup of anxiety. So talk to us about what incoming sixth graders are feeling before and after the first few weeks of the transition.
Whenever I talk about any change or transition, I like to use a metaphor, so bear with me. And it's kind of like a trapeze artist. So a trapeze artist starts on that first rung and they let go, and it's that time and space that is exhilarating, anxiety-provoking, scary. You're not sure if you're going to make it to that other rung. So anytime you think of change, it really is kind of that in-between experience.
That's a great metaphor. That moment of hanging in time where you're so excited but also so nervous. I think that's a great metaphor.
Yeah. And so children are bombarded with these movies like The Mean Girls and Diary of a Wimpy Kid, where they don't realize that for dramatic and comedic purposes that it's kind of a little bit exaggerated about what the concern is. Full disclosure, my biggest concern was being locked in a locker. And it's still a concern, actually. Do you remember what yours was?
I do, and it was not being locked in a locker. Unfortunately, I don't think I would have fit, unlike Dr. Marshall. But I had my own irrational fear in middle school, and I was so scared of forgetting something, forgetting a pencil, forgetting my homework. And I remember just thinking that the consequences were going to be monumental if that happened. So, yeah, I think a lot of kids coming into sixth grade have those irrational fears. And I know with my own daughter who just started seventh grade, I remember in fifth grade, and even before that, the rumors in elementary school already starting about, oh my gosh, Mom, did you know that in middle school, blah, blah, blah. And it was already this buildup of anxiety. So I know kids come into the situation already really nervous.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, your fear is more along the lines of what research shows is the most common fear. They most likely have a concern about the administrative stuff that's going to be different. So what's going to happen if I don't have my homework? What's going to happen if I'm late for class and things like that? So that's usually the nature of their fears.
Right. What if I forget my locker combination? Because I know
Right.
that's, that's a new thing for a lot of kids, and it's scary. There's a lot of new scary stuff,
Sure.
academically, socially. There's so much going on with kids with puberty, and it's like everything. I feel like it all creates a perfect storm of anxiety for middle school. But so let's kind of break it down a little bit and talk about the different expectations and areas of anxiety that kids face. Hi, Belinda. Oh, Belinda says her fear was finding the right classrooms. I actually, now that you bring that up, I had that fear too, Belinda. I remember that because for the first time, you get that schedule, you see that, you've got to go to this classroom and then this one and then that side of the room. And I know for my daughter, who goes to middle school here locally, they have 3 minutes in between classes now. That is it. And sometimes they have to go from, one building clear across the campus to another building. So that's a big one, Belinda. That's a very good point.
And again, along the lines of what the usual, it's that administrative stuff that kids most likely are worried about.
Yeah. So kind of tying into that, let's talk about academic expectations because those can be really scary for new middle schoolers. Do most students really struggle academically during the transition? And how can parents help without adding to that anxiety?
So actually the phenomenon of grades going down that first year is very much true, according to research, yes. And there's several reasons why that happens, but one of the biggest reasons has to do with how that child views their intellect. So there are a group of people and students that view their intellect as what they call expandable, meaning that they have the ability or trust in their ability to gain more intellect. Then there are people who believe more that they have a fixed intellect. I'm as smart as I am and that's it. So if you happen to have a more expandable view of your intellect, which is about usually 40% of students, then you're more likely to do better.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's the students that actually have a lot of confidence in being pretty smart and that they consider themselves smart that struggle the most.
Oh, wow.
Right. And the reason why that actually happens is because they have their modalities about how they study. They have the modalities that work for them and they trust in those. When you shift to middle school, you have to shift those as well. So when they see those aren't working for them like they used to, that can be very defeating. And then they lose motivation and then their grades drop.
I never thought about that, but that makes a lot of sense. So then encouraging flexibility in your kids is important, I would imagine.
Yeah, there's actually ways to foster a more expandable view. So like I said, 40% of students have the expandable view, 40% of students have a fixed view, and then about 20% is undecided. So there is room to develop more of the expandable view. And some ways to do that is when you praise a child for academics, be very specific and don't just praise the product, meaning that grade, but the process. So when you made those flashcards and hid them around the house, it seemed like that really led you to remember all that information. That was really great. So being able to reinforce that those kind of things.
That's a really great specific thing to, so instead of, oh, way to go on getting that A on your science test, way to go on like adapting to, this new way of taking notes that you're having to use in middle school. You've really, you've mastered that. Good for you. So, okay. All right. Great advice. All right. So anything else academically or administratively that you can think of that are big fears or ways that parents can ease those?
Well, definitely learning as much about the school as you can with the student, with your child, because the more information you have, the less, they're less unknown. So even some schools have a transition program. They might have a mentoring program where they pair an 8th grader up with a 6th grader. They might have an open house. So being aware of what the resources are in place already with the school would be We're back.
It looks like we're back. I hope we're back. We apologize for the technical difficulties, part of the process of going live. So if you guys could let us know that that you can see us and hear us again, that would be very helpful. Thank you. So we'll kind of pause for a minute and make sure. It looks like we're live again, but I just want to make sure that you guys can hear us. So if you can let us know, give us a thumbs up, or let us know that you're there. And remember that you can always jump on with a question. If there's anything that you would like to know on the topic, Dr. Marshall is happy to answer any questions that you have. Okay, Belinda says we're good to go. Thank you, Belinda. Okay, so we were talking about, we had just kind of covered the academic and administrative fears, and I think you were talking about how important it is to really pay attention to homework and stay involved, which is important, because I think middle school, a lot of times for parents, you feel like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to really give my kids some independence and let them do their own thing. And while I'm sure that's an important part of it, you're saying that this is really not the time to just say, hey, you're on your own, and that you actually really need to stay with them, with their homework, make sure it's getting done, and pay attention.
Right. No, absolutely, because again, this is a phenomenon. The grades may likely drop because of shifts that they need to do with studying. So if you allow that drop to occur, that is going to take a toll on their confidence in being able to do. So then when the confidence is low, then the motivation is low, and then you kind of get into this downward spiral. So yes, absolutely, still stay connected, still do homework time, still work on it with them.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's move into the social emotional sphere, which I know is the part that probably most parents are certainly worried about. It's a whole new world, and then, you know, we throw social media into the mix, and there's a lot to worry about. But let's start with just that social emotional part. What do kids fear most socially about that transition, and how do we as parents help them navigate that part?
So definitely not belonging, because that's the task. The task is to find who your group is, and it's extremely important. And the reason why that's happening is because psychologically there's a process going on called individuation, and that is that separation from the family, where they're starting to have their own ideas about things, their own ideas about politics or how the world works. So as they're separating from their family, they need a place to go, and they try and create their social family, and that is very important, and can be a very lonely and difficult process. So you imagine all these kids are trying to do that. They're trying to belong. Some children are going to deal with that in a more cruel way than others. Unfortunately, middle school is probably the most socially cruel places to exist. And again, this is science-based. But I do want to preface by saying is that most middle schoolers do make it through without so much miserable distress. So they'll be okay, but know that this is happening. And there's 5 basic social forms of cruelty that go on during this time. There's teasing, exclusion, bullying, rumoring, and ganging up on. And if it's not happening to them, I know, right?
So much.
I know. If it's not happening to them, they're seeing it happen, and they don't want it to happen to them.
Right.
So that can be extremely, extremely stressful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know with my daughter, we dealt with some of that in the first couple of weeks of middle school, and it was the teasing part, I think, and specifically what was happening was there was another girl who every morning while they were all waiting to go inside for school to start, this other girl would go up to a different boy and say about my daughter, so-and-so likes you, and then run away. And so as you can imagine, that is just absolutely mortifying when you're in 6th grade. And she was doing it every morning the first week of school. And it was so hard as a mom, because my instinct is to protect my child, and there was a part of me that really wanted to go to that school and address the situation and rescue her. And I decided not to do that. I really needed to try and let her handle it first. And this is when working with therapists comes in handy because I get a lot of great advice, and that's where this comes from. And, so I sat down with my daughter and I said, look, talk about some of the different ways that you could handle this. And we did, and she made, I thought, was a really good choice in how to handle it. And sure enough, within a two, it went away and the girls stopped doing it. Yeah. But that brings to mind an interesting thing because I think as parents, we do want to protect our children, and when is it the right time or not the right time to get involved in a teasing or bullying situation as a parent? That's a tough question right now. That is a very tough question, but
in the way you handle that, my concern is always for the parents to come in like Rambo whenever there's a situation.
Right.
Because a lot of times that causes more issues than you start.
Right.
So as your child's going into 6th grade, to let them know, look, I love you. It's going to be tough, and I don't want you to have to deal with anything. So let me know what's happening, and we'll figure it out together. But also letting them know and being honest that, look, if it has to do with your safety, and I see that it's really affecting you psychologically, I am going to have to do something. And that way, you're just being honest about that.
Okay, great point. Yeah, great. And I just want to let you guys know that if you have any questions for Dr. Marshall, please feel free to ask, and we will do our best to have her address any specific questions that you have. I know that here locally, this is the first week of school, so a lot of parents are dealing with this, and around the country, for some people, their 6th graders are just getting ready to go into middle school, or they have in the last few weeks. So if you have any specific questions that you want to for Dr. Marshall, please do so. We're happy to answer those. So we talked about the social emotional stuff, but let's get into social media, which is kind of always the biggie these days, and especially in middle school. So I know that you are actually planning an entire event for middle schoolers or for middle school parents around the dangers of social media and device addiction in November, correct? So we'll plug that quickly. November middle. It's Dr. Marshall runs every year, but this year's focus is going to be completely on social media and device addiction. So it's going to be very interesting. So on that note, let's talk a little bit about the role that social media plays. Okay.
So remember all the items I told you about regular socialization. So take that and then translate it to social media. Same stuff is happening, and the longer they are on it, not only are they more likely to be exposed to the good stuff of socializing, that they're also likely to be exposed to that negative stuff of socializing. So it's really difficult. I just recently read a study that was done in 2016, and I thought this was kind of neat. They had youth be on social media. It was a fake social media site, and they hooked them up to electrodes, and they had them just be on the site. Some of the pictures that the children were exposed to were their own, or some were from different youth. And what they found is that when a child saw their own picture with a lot of likes, the part of the brain that ended up getting lit up was the nucleus accumbens, which actually is associated with a reward. And as we know, reward is also associated with addiction.
Interesting.
Right. So again, the more exposure they have to this social media, the more likely they can get sucked into. And again, it's even at the very basic brain level that this is happening.
Wow.
So what I would recommend to parents is that do not get sucked into the mom, everyone's on it and I'll be lame if I'm not. That this is really a decision based on what I'm telling you right now that as a parent you can make. What I would recommend is limiting how many sites they're on. I actually also read a study that Instagram is actually the most negative impactful to middle schoolers, believe it, or generally for teens in general. that it is associated with the depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem.
Wow, well, that's actually very interesting, because from a parent's perspective, I think we tend to hear about all the newer ones that come out, you know, and Snapchat, although it's not really new anymore, but those seem to be the ones that people are really worried about. I know that Instagram is the most common for like girls my daughter's age, 5th and 7th grade. And so that's actually a really good reminder to me to maybe take another look at Instagram and evaluate whether or not my girls need to be on there. So
right, or even just limiting the time on there. I think that the suggestion is really no more than 2 hours on social media, and it is okay to. Oh my goodness! Someone forgot to turn off their phone.
Oh, that was my fault. Let's just silence that. We are having all kinds of interesting issues today. The joy of Facebook Live. You were talking about limiting Instagram.
Yeah.
Or limiting social media in general, 2 hours a day.
Yeah, and you know, there's nothing wrong with having a place in the house where everyone's cell phones go at 8 o'clock at night. They get plugged in, so no one is on social media, because really you are the example. How you act on social media, how much you're on social media. Children learn way much more from what we do versus what we say. So what you do has a huge impact. But definitely having some ground rules, and have their passwords for their profile wherever they are. But also know, and I just actually recently heard this, that what teens will do is they'll have the parent-friendly profile, and then they'll have their real profile that the parent sometimes doesn't know about. All the more reason why monitoring is so very important. And there's a lot of apps and computer programs that could allow you to see where that child is on social media and what they are doing.
That's a great point. We have to stay on top of it. We really do. So to wrap up, what do you think are the most important things that a parent can do to help ease the transition? Like, are there a few things that stand out to you?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So the main thing is check your own emotions and how you're responding to the transition. You know, I always go back to that example of when your toddler is learning to walk and when they fall for the first time, how you respond depends on how they're going to respond.
That's so true.
Right? You remember,
so true.
If you go, oh my God, then that child will start crying. Or if you're like, oh, you fell down, and you start giggling, well, that child will start giggling as well. So the way your emotions are going to impact how they're going to feel. So be aware of what you're putting out there about how you're experiencing this transition.
That's incredibly important and a great point. I just want to say, too, before we continue, that this is the last chance. If anyone has any specific questions that they'd like to answer, please feel free to ask those, and we have some time left to cover those. But we'll continue on. So what are the other really important things that we as parents need to do?
So one of the things, how I mentioned that socially it's such a difficult time, give them access to and involve them to other social circles that are separate from their middle school. That way, if there is drama happening at school, they have other resources to develop friendships and to kind of take a break from whatever might be happening in their middle school. So that's a huge one.
That's a good point.
And definitely do things that will foster self-esteem, like different sources of self-esteem, because their self-esteem is going to take a toll during these times. So getting them involved in hobbies, developing personal goals, making them have tasks to complete. The main source of self-esteem is feeling effective in your life. So if they can have a sense that they can do and accomplish something, and particularly on their own, then that goes ahead and builds up that self-esteem, which is pretty much a lifelong thing that develops. But this is the time that it's definitely going to be challenged quite a bit. And joining them and learning as much about the school as possible. And I think I might have mentioned this already. But again, getting them involved in school activities so they really have a connection to the school, and knowing as much about what the expectations are.
And I think, you know, on that note, too, I think one thing that I've noticed with my girls as they got a little older is that they don't want me to disassociate with the school, which is what you kind of think is going to happen. You know, you kind of buy into that myth that, you know, oh, my kids, when they get to a certain age, are going to be embarrassed by me volunteering at the school or being involved. And I know that I've been pleasantly surprised that that hasn't been their response at all. And that, you know, even into middle school, my daughter seems to really enjoy when I participate more and when I can volunteer at the school and be involved. So from my non-professional experience, I would encourage parents to not fall into that, you know, oh, my kids are going to be embarrassed, they don't want me around. I think they really do. I think they really like having their, you know, seeing that you want to be involved in their lives.
Yeah, so don't make any assumptions. Definitely, you know, still be involved. You are going to embarrass them, though.
Of course, and I do. Trust me, many, many times, and they let me know.
Yeah, but don't back up.
Hi, Rudy. I want to say hi to Rudy, who just joined us. We are getting close to wrap up, so if you have any questions for Dr. Marshall, Rudy, ask them now. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No problem.
Okay. Well, actually, then, I think that we are going to wrap up unless anyone has any additional questions. We'll plug a couple of things. That way, if anyone does have anything they want to ask, it gives them a second to do that.
Ooh, I wanted to talk about Family Day.
Yes.
So speaking of staying connected and the importance of staying connected, family meals are a perfect time to make that happen. We do a huge campaign every year to spread the importance of how good it is to continue to do that as a family. I know as kids start getting older and teens, everyone's in their separate compartments eating by themselves, but that is not the time to do that. And it's a huge preventative tool to actually sit down as a family together. I think the stats are where children who eat family meals or meals as a family more often than not are, I believe, 53% more likely to say no to drugs and alcohol, 27% more likely to say they have a good relationship with their parents, I believe 60% more likely to do well in school. So
I'm impressed that you can rattle those stats off like that. But I have been really impressed by those statistics as we have prepared our marketing materials for Family Day, because it's amazing when you see how effective such a simple thing is, you know, sharing meals together as a family and just making the effort to do it, even if you can, you know, if you're not doing it at all right now because everybody, like you said, is running in their separate directions, and maybe set a goal to do it 3 times a week. We are going to sit down and we're going to eat as a family, and we're going to all put our phones away again, setting a good example. And I know that there are some great resources, some websites where they have conversation starters and games and interesting ways that you can involve your children in conversation other than just, you know, how was school today, because we know the blank stare we get when we ask that question. Are those available at the CASA Family Day site?
That's right. There's a Facebook page that CASA Columbia has. I believe it's CASA Family Day. And then, of course, Tykes&Teens has our Family Day Facebook page that we post conversation starters and fun games that you can play at the dinner table. Also involving children in the process of making dinner is also a good idea. So anything that gives you an excuse to talk to your children and stay connected is always a great idea.
Absolutely. Rudy says, so glad that Tykes&Teens is so committed to prevention. Great job, Dr. Marshall and Lauren. Oh, thank you, Rudy. That's so kind. Thank you. And just as a reminder for anybody that joined us late, didn't get to see the whole presentation, all of these Facebook Live presentations on various topics are always available on our website at tykesandteens.org. So you can go there at any time and watch them in their entirety. We'll also do a quick plug again for Middle, November 4th, and it is going to be at IRSC,
the Justin campus on Salerno Road. That's right. I'm very, very excited about this one. We actually have a expert, nationally known expert, who will be talking about the different psychological implications about the internet. So internet addiction, device addiction. We'll have law enforcement come in to talk about things that parents should know to keep their children safe, that they might not know about some interesting apps that are out there. Like I know I remember hearing about picture app where it looks like a calculator, but if you pull it up and you put a certain number in it,
Yes.
It's actually a code, like a combination code, and it will store pictures that a kid doesn't want his parents to see.
Scary stuff. But yeah, our local law enforcement here is so good in Martin County, and they have so many great resources to offer, and we love when they participate with us, and you know, they're seeing things that we as parents aren't always seeing, and so they have a lot to offer on that topic. So and then finally, I'm just going to plug our next Facebook Live presentation when our CEO, Jeff Shearer, will be back Thursday, August 31st, and he is going to be talking about infant mental health and helping the youngest victims thrive. That should be really interesting. Most people don't even really realize that infant mental health exists, and I will tell you, it's truly fascinating to learn about. So join us for that. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Dr. Marshall. We appreciate all your expertise.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.